We had a close, exciting end to the regular URC season. Let's hope for more of the same in this week's quarterfinals. My name's Mark. Let's talk rugby. We've got some really exciting matchups now in the quarterfinals. Should be some pretty close games, and potentially there's going to be some shocks there as well. We're going to do the usual. We're going to go through each of the games in turn, tell you about, the basic details about it, talk about the form of each of the teams, and then we're going to make a prediction as well. And then, feel free, post your predictions down in the comments as well, and let me know who you think your money is on at the moment. I'll let you know who I think is the favourite for the tournament, at least at this stage. Obviously, after the quarterfinals, that may change. So we are going to start with the first quarterfinal, which is the best place to start, I always find. So it's Friday, June the 7th. It's a 7:35 kickoff, and this is Munster versus Ospreys. This is first versus 8th, and it's at Thomond Park. It's on Premier Sport and RTE. So Munster, top of the log, versus Ospreys, who got in, to this position basically 5 minutes or 4 minutes, I think, to go in the game against Cardiff. Like, they got the score that basically won them the game, and got them in this position where they leapfrog the likes of the Lions and Edinburgh, and pulled away from Connacht as well to pinch that final spot. They didn't qualify for Champions Cup, but URC has grown in importance now. And one thing I loved seeing was the videos of, there was a video of some of the fans coming back from the game on the bus. They're all singing, they're all happy. And, sometimes in the rugby media and on social media especially, people kind of build up this thing of, not just rivalry between different groups of fans, but almost hatred, kind of like football or soccer type hatred. And for me, that's something that I don't feel. The great thing I love about rugby is the fact that we're all just rugby fans, and whether a team wins or loses, and whether some bad things happen on the game, and maybe that shouldn't have been the card, or that guy should have been sent off, or that guy cheated, or whatever, we can still be just rugby fans and enjoy a point together, or enjoy a chat together, and whether online chat to each other as well, and be respectful to each other. And that's what I love about this game, is that it's not like a lot of other sports. Yes, there are assholes in the game, but I think to prepare the amount of assholes is maybe less compared to other sports, and therefore you end up meeting, for the most part, the vast majority of rugby fans are decent people who are willing to sit down and have a chat with you about rugby, and take the mickey or whatever, and just have a good time together. And no kind of hatred or that kind of thing being there that you see maybe in other sports. Certainly no violence around it. Maybe there's a few drunk idiots again, but for the most part, it's all very respectful. So for me, seeing those Welsh fans celebrating on the bus, all I can feel is joy, because just as a fellow rugby fan, I know how it feels like that, where your team, for whatever it is, they haven't won something in a while, or they haven't got to a certain level, or they just haven't won a game in a while, and then suddenly it comes and it's just ecstatic. And especially when the way with the Ospreys, it was like very unexpected, not just from outside of the Ospreys. I think a lot of Ospreys fans, even though, and I've been in those positions before, with Leinster, because some people will remember the fact that Leinster weren't always this kind of juggernaut, always getting to finals, blah 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 team, right? They were a team previously who'd would struggle to advance, especially in Europe, much beyond a quarter final, and maybe not even get out of their pool. So I remember those dark days, and I know what it's like. So when it's something like that, where it's almost out of the blue for especially for Ospreys fans as well, who again would be believe, you'd say, yeah, I think we're going to do it, I think we're going to do it, but then there's that bit at the back of your mind is saying, we're not going to do it. What am I talking about? I'm an idiot. Of course we're not going to do it, and we're going to get close, but we're definitely not going to do it. And then they do it, and then it's just wow, like just go crazy and enjoy yourself, and that's, I love seeing those videos of those guys, and it's just brilliant to see. As a URC fan, a massive URC fan, I want to see more Welsh fans getting on board and enjoying this competition. And hopefully then, if we can do that and we can get the Welsh fans on board and get the Welsh Rugby Union to support their regions and not keep talking about, oh, maybe we're going to chop one of the regions and we don't have any money and blah, blah, blah. And like, how are you supposed to have your regions planning for the long term when every 5 minutes is like, well, maybe we'll scrap the regions and we'll go with something else or do this or do that. Like, it's just not conducive. So I'm happy on their behalf that the Ospreys fans had that moment, and who knows what's going to happen from here, right? But that's been said. Let's get into this game itself. So Munster versus Ospreys, we're going to look at the form of the two teams coming into this as well. So first of all, Munster, they've won their last 7 games on the trot, and that run actually goes back a lot further. We'll look at that in a minute. Ospreys, they've won 4 of the last 7, which is decent for them, especially given that they kind of had a dip in form and then they had to pull themselves up in the last 2 rounds. They had, I think, like before those last 2 wins that they got, they had I think 2% chance was the prediction of them actually qualifying for the playoffs. So absolute miracle from them. And, yes, other results had to go their way to do it, but they did their part. And that's the important thing. Other teams like the Lions, they had a chance to qualify and they couldn't produce. Okay, so well done to the Ospreys for being able to do that. So let's look at the last 7 games for each of these teams in turn. So first of all, Munster, before we get into those last 7, Munster's run stretches, like they've actually won the last 9 on the trot, and that's back to round 10. And the last time they lost was actually round 9. So that's the end of the first half of the regular season. And that was on January 1st where they lost to Connacht 22-9 at the Dexcom Stadium. Since then, in the URC, it's just been all wins for Munster. So that's the form these guys are in. And I talked about before how, initially, the run was Munster doing what they needed to win, but not necessarily looking all that brilliant doing it. But now they're still getting the wins, and you see that their attack has clicked, and they look in easily in the best form of any team in the competition. So the last 7 is back to round 12, which was actually the Ospreys at Swansea.com Stadium, and Munster won that game 27-17. Then round 13, 20 points to 15 win over Cardiff. Next one then, they went to South Africa, 27-22. They won at Loftus against the Bulls. And then Emirates Airlines Park against the Lions, they won 33-13. So, doing the double away in South Africa, just helping again build that momentum coming in to these knockout stages. Then back to Thomond Park from round 16, 47-12 win against Connacht, very comprehensive win there. And that's where you're seeing, them really going from doing what was needed to win games to the style is in there as well. And that the players are really enjoying their rugby. And that's a very potent force as well. When you have players who are in good form, who are enjoying the rugby, and things just seem to fall in place for them. That's where Munster are at the minute. Then round 17, a tough game at the Hive Stadium against Edinburgh, but Munster come out again 29-26. Again, finding that way to win tight games. That's been kind of Munster's MO in the last couple of seasons, especially. Again, another tight game then in round 18 at Thomond Park, 29-24 against Ulster. Comeback win for them. And again, they found that way to win at the end. And you know, when you're in that kind of form, you never feel like you're beaten in a game, and that's very potent going in to the knockout stages. If you look at then Ospreys run over the last 7, so round 12 again was that defeat at home to Munster, 27-17. Then round 13, much better result for them. Again at Swansea.com Stadium, 36-21 win against the Lions. And the Lions at that stage were in, decent form. And that win there was, pretty much reignited, I felt, the Ospreys push to, to get into the playoffs. They were hanging around 8th place, but they looked like they were maybe the team who were dropping, after, like, they'd lost to Munster, as we talked about, but they lost to Edinburgh before that as well. So 2 losses in a row, and they were hanging around 8th place and looked like they were the guys to target on the back that other teams are coming after. But then the win against the Lions just said, listen, we're not just going to roll over and let other teams qualify ahead of us. Then round 14, an amazing win at the DHL Stadium, 27-21 against the Stormers. Round 15, maybe brought down, humbled a little bit and brought down to earth. 61-24 defeat against the Bulls, but the Bulls do this a lot around this time of the year against teams who, feel like they're on a bit of run. The Bulls just pull out a crazy scoreline against them. Then round 16, another heavy defeat, 61-14 against Leinster. And those 2 defeats, conceding 61 points in both of them. So a total of 122 points conceded over 2 games. And, Ospreys then really feeling like, maybe the chance is gone. And that was when they had that 2% chance to qualify. And you can see why, if they're getting hockey 2 games in a row, you just feel like, okay, maybe that's, the Ospreys are busted now and it's there for somebody else to take. But Ospreys then, they have their local derbies, 26-13 against the Dragons. And then in the Judgment Day game, final game of the round, they knew what they had to do. Doesn't mean that it was going to be easy for them, but they pull out the bonus point win, 33 points to 29 against Cardiff, and that was enough to qualify them for this one. So Ospreys with those 2 wins on the bounce there. But when we look at it, like the last kind of significant win really was round 14, that 27-21 win against the Stormers. I'm not saying that, obviously the last 2 rounds got them where they are, but they were against Welsh teams. We have to see the Ospreys performing more against non-Welsh teams. We saw them doing it in South Africa and against the Lions as well at home, so they can do it against South African teams. Now they've got to do it against the team who finished top of the log, defending champions, and the absolute form team coming into this. So Ospreys, they pulled off a miracle in qualifying, and they probably got to pull off another miracle as well to actually, progress beyond the quarterfinal. Munster, as I said, they've hit that form. The guys are playing with confidence. Crowley, we saw him against Ulster, maybe a mixed bag from him in terms of his performance, but it just reminded us he's a young guy, and he's, we don't get reminded so much about that with him, basically because he's so composed in most instances, and his performance level is just so high, that you forget that the guy hasn't been around that long and he's still learning his trade. He performs generally as if he's been doing it, for 10 years at this level and not just a couple of years, or and that's a credit to him and a credit to his team as well. And given the fact that Munster as well, not all of, like, they still have injuries in the midfield as well. I think Frisch and Ankerville have been out the last few, but other players are coming back, like Peter Romani back into the team there. He's a huge plus for them as well. And I think stacking the teams up against each other, Munster have maybe a few more match winners than Ospreys do, and because of that, I'm going to go for the Munster win. But whether Ospreys pull off a miracle win or to go down fighting against Munster and they go out. It's still been a fantastic season for them. And again, I'm just so happy for those Ospreys fans, and I want to see more Welsh fans being happy with the URC as well, because for me, I think it's a fantastic competition, and I want to see all of the fans in the competition enjoying it and our teams being competitive. Okay, so that's our first quarterfinal. As I said, prediction is that Munster are going to win that one. On to the next quarterfinal. So this one is on Saturday, June the 8th. It's a 2:30 kickoff, and this is Vodacom Bulls versus Benetton. It's at Loftus Versfeld. This is second place versus seventh, and it's on Premier Sport and TG Car for anyone watching in Ireland. So now this is another interesting one. If we look at the form between the teams as well, so the Bulls have won 5 of the last 7, and Benetton 4 of the last 7. So again, even the teams who have just about qualified for the playoffs are in decent form as well coming in. There's nobody really that has a negative form book coming in. Each of the teams in this quarterfinal have won at least 4 of the last 7 games, and that's what makes me excited about it as well. There's nobody who is an obvious team where you go, well, that team just dropped like a rock, and therefore, they're definitely going to get beaten. The closest actually probably would be Leinster, but we'll talk about them when we get to their game. So Bulls, as I said, 5 of the last 7, and Benetton 4 of the last 7. So let's actually have a look at what those games were. So starting with the Bulls, round 12, Rodney Parade against the Dragons, 31-10. Really good win for them. Then round 13, a bit of a hiding. Leinster 47-14 against the Bulls team who would have felt, having won so well in Rodney Parade, that this was kind of a top of the table clash at the time as well, and it felt like the Bulls had a chance to knock Leinster off the perch. Leinster did eventually get knocked off the perch, but it wasn't the Bulls that actually dealt that fatal blow to them. On to round 14 then. More strife against an Irish province. Back at Loftus, 27-22, they lost against Munster. And now, at that stage then, Bulls, having been up there challenging Leinster for top spot, suddenly they're the team that are looking over their shoulders at the likes of Munster and Glasgow coming after them. So then they've got to produce something, and they produce, first of all, a 61-24 win against Ospreys at Loftus, and that really bred confidence back into them. And then the week after, then facing off against the Warriors, and this was one where you felt like the winner of this one would be the team that potentially is going to knock Leinster off the top. And the Bulls 40 points to 34, but Glasgow were well beaten, and then they came back and scored a bunch of tries to get a couple of losing bonus points out of the game. But the Bulls looked majestic at times in that one. Then it didn't stop from there. Their opponents now in the quarterfinals, Benetton, round 17, Loftus, 56 points to 35. And the Bulls just have this thing of, when they get to this point in the competition, the end of the regular season, they just reel off these big wins against teams. And it's where generally we see the Bulls doing what I believe they're best at, which is that combination of power and really good backs, the pace and the intricacy there as well, the handling skills, everyone working together. What they need to avoid really in the playoffs is sometimes the Bulls forget that they have backs, and the forwards want to do everything. And the forwards pounding away at the line, they suck in the defence, just space either side. They're not bothered with that. The forwards are going to get over and they're going to score, and then they get turned over to give away a penalty, they knock on, whatever. It happens to them in those tight games. So if they can remember that, they're best when they have those options of going with power or going with subtlety, and blend those two together, I think they've got a genuine chance of winning the whole competition. But round 18 then, against the Sharks. So Sharks, I'm not going to say like it wasn't kind of Nostradamus predicting what was going to happen in this one, was that the Sharks, having won the Challenge Cup, wouldn't be as bothered about winning the game compared to the Bulls. Not saying that they didn't want to win the game, just saying that it's just natural, right? You win a final, you've got, like, for you, what is like, a dead rubber at the end of the season. For the Bulls, no, like they've something riding on it, but the Sharks really didn't have anything riding on it. And what they wanted to do was end the game and let's parade the trophy around and celebrate with our fans. And they got to do that, but it meant that, the Bulls were able to pull off the win there. And again, some really good play from the Bulls in that win, and that got them up to that second place. So let's look at their opponents then. Benetton. So Benetton from round 12, defeat to the Scarlets, 16 points to 13 at Parky Scarlet. And, at that point then, they the round before they'd lost to Glasgow 19 points to 9, and then they lost to Leinster 47 points to 18. And it felt like they were kind of slipping away. They were at one point up in second place in the league, but they were falling down, down out of the playoff places at that stage. And you were a little bit worried about, what they were able to do. Round 13 then, a big win for them against a rival to get into those playoff stages at the Stadio Moningo, and that was 18-14 against Connacht. On to round 14 then, another decent win, 36 points to 19 against the Dragons. Then round 15, a tight defeat, 38 points to 34 against Ulster, but really good performance from them in that one, and that was important. Yes, it was a defeat, but the performance was really good, and you could see that there was enough there for them to potentially secure a playoff place. Round 16 then, 25 points to 24, a win in South Africa for them against the Sharks, and that really was, again, confidence builder for them. 56 points to 35 against the Bulls. It's a big defeat, but it wasn't as big a hiding as the Bulls had handed out to other teams around that time as well. And Benetton, whatever about conceding 56 points, scoring 35 points on the road in South Africa is no mean feat as well. So that's something that certainly could be proud of. And then round 18, that playoff basically against Edinburgh. Both teams come into that game knowing that the winner was going to go on to the quarterfinals, and the loser was going to have to wait and sweat on the results. And Benetton 31 points to 6. Edinburgh, getting ahead early on and having chances to score, but Benetton, they weathered the storm. They got a try on turnover ball, and then they start putting more and more pressure on Edinburgh, forcing mistakes, and then they got themselves a bit of a lead, and then their play as well. Some of the play, like from Brex, like his handoff on Van der Merwe as he set up a try was just brilliant. So really good way for them to come in to the playoffs as well at that point. So got the Bulls versus Benetton. Fact that it's at Loftus, I have to say I've got to back the Bulls. This looks like a good one for the Bulls to win, and then they're then into a semi-final. And Bulls, I think, are compared. If you compare these two teams, I think both will tell you they're focused on the game of the weekend, right? But I absolutely guarantee you that the Bulls are thinking about, we can win this, right? We now have a route to the final, and potentially, once we get to the final, we've got a game to be able to win that final as well. Whereas Benetton are going to be the stereotypical one game at a time type focus. And both teams will tell you that. But Benetton will be just thinking about, okay, what can we do in this one? With no, yes, they will dream about lifting the trophy. But nobody in Benetton is thinking about, we've got a route to the final or wherever. They're going to think it's going to be a tough game. We were there a few weeks ago and hopefully learned some lessons from that. Let's give it our best shot and see what happens. But I think that the Bulls are going to win this one simply because they're in really good form at the minute, and they have more experience in terms of knockout in this competition as well. Home advantage too. Everything for me points to a Bulls win, and I'm going to go for a Bulls win because of that. Okay, so next one then is Leinster versus Ulster. This is a 5 o'clock kickoff on Saturday the 8th of June. It's at the Viva Stadium. It's 3rd versus 6th. I'm not sure how, it's going to be interesting to see how many fans are actually there, because Leinster have obviously had, they had their quarter-final at the Aviva, semi-final at Croke Park as well. So a lot of our Leinster fans have shelled out a lot of money going to big venues and paying a lot for tickets as well. And now they've got, they had the disappointment, some of them would have travelled over to London, to the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium as well, and having shelled out a lot of money on that. Now they've got to put their hands in the pocket again for tickets to the Aviva. And then you got Ulster, having thought that their season was a write-off, suddenly find themselves in a position where they're in a quarter-final against Leinster at the Aviva with, not an insignificant chance of winning. And therefore, you might see a lot more Ulster fans there. I still think the majority are going to be Leinster fans, but it's maybe going to be, a closer mix than maybe you would have seen in other years. I think, a lot of Leinster fans will kind of have a little bit of fatigue as well over just every year it seems to happen, right? URC can't even get to the final. Champions Cup, get to the final and lose every year for the last 3 years. So it's going to be interesting to see on that scale. Let's have a look at the form coming in as well. So Leinster, 4 out of 7 is the worst form we've seen them in this year, and it contributed to them not just losing the top spot in the league, but actually finishing 3rd in the league. Ulster, 4 out of 7 is actually an uptick for them. So even though both teams have a, pretty much identical run of form over the last 7 coming into this, it seems that, for Ulster, it's more positive than for Leinster. And, with Leinster as well, you have to think about is that the teams that produce those results, because only, if you look at the last 5 games that Leinster played, only one of those games actually involved the team or the bulk of the team that played in the Champions Cup final. So, it means that you don't have, you don't have a kind of the same kind of effect, I feel, compared to, an Ulster team who don't rotate as much. Well, pretty much nobody rotates as much as Leinster. And whether it's going to have a negative or a positive, there are positives, obviously, from Leinster, but also, depending on who they pick, because if I'm Leo Cullen, I'm just picking my best team, because I'm not doing what they did last year, where I said, okay, let's pick this team, and then if we get through, then the Champions Cup players can come back in and they can play. No, for me, it's like, it's a quarter-final, you pick your best team, and if they win, great. If someone get injured, okay, we've got squad players for a reason. They come in and they can do a job. And then if we get to a semi-final, the same thing happens. Then, we lose a few more players come in. But we don't, for me, you don't go, okay, well, these guys still need a bit more rest after their efforts in the Champions Cup final. So therefore, they're not going to play, and we're going to give kind of a mixed team of half kind of Champions Cup team and half URC team and see how they go. Then they lose, and then what have you got left? Like those other guys now who you wanted to give an extra week's rest now have the entirety of the off season in Leinster terms at least to rest. Obviously, a lot of them are going to be going down to South Africa. You would imagine at least for the tour down there. But for me, it just seems nonsensical to not. And when you get into knockout stages, Champions Cup is done now. For me, there's no reason not to pick as strong a team as you have available. And hopefully, we're hearing about talk of Ringrose coming back, etc., which hopefully means that it will be a strong team that goes into this. And for me, it should be, however far Leinster progress, it should be as strong a team as they can pick every single game. And whether that's like they pick a strong team that'll lose to Ulster, well, fair and square, they lost to Ulster, so what? But at least you can't then point to, oh well, I've had to pick this guy or that guy. So let's see on selection for that, but also let's have a look at the last 7 for both of these teams. So we're going to start with Leinster. So round 12 was away in the Stadio Sergio Lanfranchi, 31 points to 7 win against Zebre. Leinster actually looked pretty good in that game too, and you look at that, you think, well, it's only Zebre, so what? But for me, it was significant because last year, in last season's URC, the opening game for Leinster was actually in Zebre, and they only just about come out with a win in that one. And Zebre had been competitive in most of the home games as well this year, so I thought that was a really good performance from Leinster. And then they go into the top of the table clash against the Bulls, and they win 47 points to 14. And for me, like the Leinster team kind of peaked twice this year, and once was the URC, which was this game here. I thought that this was kind of the peak for Leinster this year in terms of the URC was this performance here. It was brilliant. This team was kind of a hybrid, kind of the Champions Cup, like Ireland internationals or whatever, first team mixed with some of their bench teams, and then some squad players as well. So just an example, the front row was like Healy, Kelleher and Al Alato, which was the bench front row in the Champions Cup final. Then the second row was Maloney and McCarthy. Back row was Baird, Van der Fleur and Conan. So kind of mixing matching players. And then the bench, then you had players like Luke McGrath, Harry Byrne, James Lowe, Jamie Osborne, Robbie Henshaw, Rob Russell and Jordan Larmour. So a lot of really good players in there, but some key players missing as well from that team. But it was a brilliant performance from them. And then the other peak that I felt they had this year was that quarterfinal win against La Rochelle. And I think these two games weren't that far apart in terms of the chronology of it. I don't think they were like one or 2 weeks away from each other, but it was kind of a similar period in the season at least when they happened. But then Leinster did as they did last year and decided that they were going to send a weakened team to South Africa. In fairness, it wasn't as weakened as it was last year, because last year the Leinster's trip to South Africa came a couple of rounds later, and they decided that they were going to keep one team at home who were preparing for the Champions Cup. I don't know whether it was semi-final and final or just the final, but there was a Champions Cup team who were back in Dublin who they were in camp. They were just preparing for their big game. I think it was the final. And then you had another team, the URC team. So that would be like the likes of Harry Byrne, that kind of level of player, the likes of Osborne and Turner, etc. And and they were preparing for the knockout stages of the URC. And Leinster, I think it was the final 2 rounds was South Africa, so they sent a really weakened team over there. They actually won the first game, and then they lost. I think they won against the Sharks, right? And then they lost the second game quite heavily against the Bulls. But this year, the team that they sent still wasn't anywhere near their first team, and they got what they deserved out of it, really. 44 points to 12 defeat to the Lions first up, and 42 points to 12 defeat against the Stormers. Then round 16, Leinster respond a little bit. 61 points to 14 win against Ospreys, but it was really only like a one-off kind of thing for them, because then round 17, 23 points to 21 deserved defeat against Ulster. I thought Ulster were much the better of the two teams in that one. And in round 18, 33 points to 7 against the Connacht team, who kind of finished the season with a bit of a whimper. On to Ulster then. So, Ulster did so well to turn their season around after Richie Murphy came in. But the start of this run, they were still kind of struggling a little bit. Round 12, 22 points to 12 defeat against the Sharks in Kings Park. Then the Stormers then in round 13, 30 points to 7 in the DHL Stadium. So, a decent performance from Ulster there, showing some signs that there was some improvement happening. Then, I think a win that kind of, in many respects, kind of drew a line under, the troubles that they're having. And 19 points to 17 win against Cardiff, a game that they absolutely should not have won. I'm absolutely convinced that Cardiff should have won that game. Ulster were not very good in the game, and right at the death, it felt like Cardiff should have got the win, but Ulster somehow come out with the win in that one. And even though it was a poor performance, they got the win, and that seemed to give them confidence. And from there, Ulster have just gotten better and better, even though some results have gone against them. But round 15 then, 38 points to 34, as I talked about in Benetton's one as well. Both teams are performing really well, but Ulster coming out with the win. Then round 16, 31 points to 20 against the Scarlets. And you can see that confidence is building now in their squad. Then at 23 points to 21 win against Leinster, which, Ulster really controlled that game very well. And they outthought and outfought Leinster, I felt, in that one. Round 18 then, 29 points to 24 defeat in Thomond Park against Munster, but they performed really well. So going into this, they've got to feel like they have a chance in this one, certainly more of a chance than anyone would have given them a few weeks ago. Going in against Leinster, Ulster have actually done the double over Leinster this year as well. So that's something that they have to back them up. I think it was another tight one as well earlier on in the season. Let me check. I'm pretty sure it was almost similar scores. Yeah, it was. RDS in round 9, Leinster 21, Ulster 22. So 1 point game. It was a 2 point game at the Kingspan. So Ulster edging both of those tight games. And I think that's the key for Ulster, is if they can make this a tight, kind of low scoring game, they have the edge over Leinster in that respect. If it becomes an expansive, let's see who can score the most points, and you're talking about somewhere in the 30s or maybe touching on the 40s, then I think Leinster are going to win it. So Ulster's job really is to make that a tight, messy affair, maybe bring some niggle into it, instigate a few bouts of handbags or whatever, and make it as messy as possible against Leinster. I think then you would almost make Ulster favourites if they can do that in it. But if they allow Leinster to play, or if they decide that they're going to stand toe to toe with Leinster in the expansive, you play your best attacking rugby and we'll do the same, I think Leinster are going to win and win comfortably. But Ulster have been able to make it a scrap for 2 games. I'm not saying like that Ulster didn't play some good rugby in that. They did, but the thing that they did as well is they stifled the Leinster attack, and you do that with Leinster by knocking them off their stride, and you do that any way you can. And if that means having some, a few bouts of handbags, as I said, or getting in there and disrupting them at the breakdown or wherever it is, you do that, and you then make them less potent that way. Instead of saying, okay, we'll stand back, you come at us with your multi-option, multi-phase attack, and we'll see how we get on. I don't think that's going to work out too well for Ulster. But for this one, I feel like Leo is going to pick a really strong Leinster team, and therefore I'm going to back Leinster to win it. But I will say this, okay? Leinster are going to have a strong bench, and there's going to be even people, I don't know why, but pundits and etc., they don't seem to learn from like what's happened in the past, and they don't look at what's happened in the past and go, oh, look at this. That's not a coincidence. This has happened on multiple occasions. But the Leinster bench, okay? You look at the Leinster bench, and if it's a bench that's going to be picked, you look and go, this guy has so many caps for Ireland, so many caps for Ireland, so many caps for whoever, blah, 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 all the way down, right? Or like really decent young player coming through, if the likes of, Frawley, even like Ireland capped as well on the bench. We look down through, Frawley will probably maybe start 15 with no Hugh Keenan, but you might see Osborne or somebody on there as well. But you look down the Leinster bench and you go, wow, look at the strength of that bench. And then you look at Ulster's bench and you go, they're not so good in comparison, right? You look at the Leinster bench, you say, oh, look at all the experience those guys have, and they've got so many test caps and blah, 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 right? And they go, if it comes, and then somebody will say, oh, if it's a tight game, if it comes down to the bench, Leinster are going to win, okay? But my contention is that that Leinster bench have very little experience of winning tight games in a Leinster shirt, and the Ulster bench on the other hand have more experience, even against Leinster this year. They've done it twice, of coming off the bench and having positive impact on the result of the game. Okay, for me, that Leinster bench, what they're really good at is when you get to that kind of period in the game where it's around about kind of 45 to 55 minutes, right? And maybe Leinster are ahead by a score or two, and the opposition are coming back at them. What that Leinster bench are really good at, they come on and they absolutely tear the opposition a new one. The opposition are pushing, trying to get scores coming back. Leinster can sit off them a little bit or be aggressive at the breakdown, whatever way they want to do it, because they're basically holding all the cards, right? And that Leinster bench in that scenario will perform absolutely really well. You're going to see maybe intercept tries, and you will see Leinster basically weathering a little bit of a storm and then coming back and scoring more points and ending up pulling away from the opposition in that period of kind of 45 to maybe like just before 60 minutes or just over 60 minutes, right? And they'll have the game won by then, right? Is what I think will happen if Leinster are winning by a couple of scores at that period of time. And then in the last 20 minutes, you might then see Ulster coming and scoring a few tries to make the scoreline look a bit closer in the end, right? But if we get to around about the 60-minute mark and Ulster are either winning or they're just within a score of Leinster, that bench, I don't think for Leinster has the experience in a Leinster shirt. And I think it makes a difference whether it's in a Leinster shirt or in an Ireland shirt, because in an Ireland shirt there are different players there from the other provinces who have, I think, more dog about them than many of these Leinster players, especially the ones coming off the bench. And if it's a tight game there, you're going to see some decent play from these players, but not necessarily plays that are actually going to overturn a deficit and win the game for them. And so for me, maybe they will prove me wrong and come on, a score behind Ulster, and Leinster will end up winning. And if they do, I'm just going to be ecstatic because I'm a Leinster fan, right? But when I'm watching the game, if it's 60 minutes and Ulster are winning by a score, I'm I'm not going to be too confident about the end result. Let's just put it that way. Okay, but I do feel that Leinster, they're going to pick a strong team, and I feel like that strong team, they're going to maybe get out to a bit of a lead. Maybe not straight away. I have a feeling that Ulster might score, the first try of the game, and then Leinster will come back, and they're going to, we're going to see the old kind of Leinster 1-2 score just before halftime, score just after halftime, and then maybe tag on another couple of scores. Ulster start chasing the game. That's the way I think it's going to go. That's the way I hope it's going to go, more importantly. And because of that, I'm going to back a Leinster win. But with in terms of URC quarterfinals, this is the least confident I've been of Leinster winning a quarterfinal in the 3 years that the URC has been in existence. But I think if Leinster get through this and it's a decent performance, it's a strong team, then they can look at semi-final, etc. I think compared to other years as well, even though Leinster didn't make the final in any of the other years, a lot of people would have looked at the Leinster team and gone, okay, well, they've got a route to the final and they've got to be thinking about lifting the trophy. This year, I don't think there's many people thinking about that. I think Leinster are one of those teams who are like Benetton, actually thinking game by game, let's win this game. And for Leinster, I think the whole, master planners, etc., getting your strategy right about resting players at this time and blah, blah, blah. For Leinster, it's actually better for them for that to go out the window, I think, at this stage. And they just think of, okay, what do we need to do to win this game? Not how can we win this game while also saving players for the next game. I think too much of that has happened in Leinster. So with this one, I'm going to go for a Leinster win. And then on to the final quarterfinal, which is a 7:35 kickoff. And this one is Glasgow Warriors versus DHL Stormers. So it's 4th versus 5th. It's at the Scotstoun Stadium. And this is another one that I feel like is going to be close because the Stormers, they've made the final every year. I know it's only been 2 years, but still, you don't make finals by accident. They won it 2 years ago, and they made a good defense as well last year, getting to the final and losing to Munster. But again, you don't make finals 2 years in a row by being a lucky team. Yeah, yes, a lucky team can get there once, but being able to repeat the trick the next year just shows how good a squad the Stormers have. And with Glasgow as well, Glasgow generally their performance in the league is pretty good. It's when they get to knockout stages that they struggle. So I think this is going to be a close and very interesting contest between these two as well. Let's have a look at the form coming into this one as well. So Glasgow have won 5 of the last 7, but only 1 of the last 3. The Stormers have won 6 of their last 7. So apart from Munster, they're the team with the best form over the last 7 games coming into knockout stages, and they've won 4 on the bounce as well. So that's a big kind of G up for them, I think, going into this game. Yes, they're away from home, but the Stormers have shown in the past that they can overcome that disadvantage, and especially against a team with Glasgow, who for whatever reason, I think it's a mental issue with that squad, that when it comes down to knockout games where you want them to play the game that they've played all year and just to deliver a decent performance, it goes out the window for them, and they end up like underperforming and talking about afterwards, like Glasgow a lot of the time. And it's kind of similar to the Scotland team, I think, where the players before the game will be talking up about, this is our final and we're not going to leave anything to chance, and we're going to give absolutely everything out on the field. And then afterwards, then you look at the performance, you go, that doesn't tie up with what the guys were talking about beforehand. So I think it's probably a mental thing for them. And if I was, whatever, the CEO of Glasgow Rugby, like one, now teams that are looking at recruiting players, etc., for next season. For me, one of my biggest recruits between now and next season would be like an absolute like world-beating sports psychologist to come in and figure out what's actually mentally happening with their players when they get to this stage of the season. And then if they can fix that, I think this is a team that have all of the, they've got the players, they've got the setup to lift trophies. And that's what I'd be getting at, is how do we get these players, in the mental state where they can perform when it's really needed in these games. So for me, that would be the signing of the off season for Glasgow, would be somebody like that who could come in and change that mindset around these types of games. Not just this quarterfinal, but if they get through that, semi-final, final, etc. So let's have a look at the last 7 for these two teams. So starting with Glasgow, round 12, 17 points to 13 win at Scotstoun, against Cardiff. Then round 13, a nice win in Parky Scarlets, 45 points to 3 against the Scarlets. And this was kind of their run to, eventually knocking Leinster off the top of the pile. And I felt like once they got to that point, then they kind of took a breather and took their eye off the ball a little bit. So round 14 then, 21 points to 10 win against the Sharks. And round 15, a 40 points to 9 win away against Ospreys. So really good, strong run for them there. Then they go to South Africa, 40 points to 34 defeat against the Bulls. Again, Glasgow really were kind of well beaten in the game, and then came back and scored a bunch of tries to get a couple of bonus points out of it. But at that point, these were the two major rivals to Leinster at that point, at least, at the top of that table. Obviously, Munster came up with their amazing run of form to outdo all of them. But it felt like for Glasgow, even though, in other years you would have said that's a decent performance to go down to, to the Bulls, only lose by 6 points, and to score, to get 2 bonus points out of the game as well. But given the context of it, it felt like it was, a bit of a blow to them. Then the next round, round 17, 44 points to 21 against the Lions. So 2 defeats on the trot, and not looking all that good. Then round 18, 38 points to 26 against Ospreys. Ospreys stuck in that game for so long. Probably Ospreys' best, well, certainly Ospreys' best away performance of the season, but probably their best away performance that they've produced, certainly in the URC era, for me. Just, so dogged of them. Yes, last game of the season, sometimes teams can get a bit of a bounce, but Glasgow didn't really look like they were in control of the game until towards the end, where they pulled away a little bit. So, a bit of a kind of a wobble, I would say, coming into these playoffs. And so you got Glasgow there and the Stormers, and as I said, it's a very tight one, and obviously 4th versus 5th, you would expect to be tight, because in terms of the seedings for the knockout stages, is the 2 teams that are closest in the table, right? But Glasgow have been part of that top 4 for so long, and the Stormers, for a few rounds had been kind of excluded with no chance of even coming up to challenge 4th place. That there was a gap between them, but now you look at it and you think the gap is a lot narrower than it was before. And looking at past performance in knockout stages of this competition over the last couple of seasons, Glasgow, who I said kind of, for me, didn't perform up to their potential. Like, and we'll have, actually, let me just pull up their performance over the last couple of seasons in the knockout stages. So let me go to first of all, 2021. I think they finished. Did they finish 4th in 2021? so forgive me here, but I want to pull them up because they don't make great reading. Let's put it that way. So first of all, 2021-22 season quarterfinal, 76 points to 14. Defeat at the RDS against Leinster, first versus eighth. So they finished eighth there. They finished fourth last season, actually. So absolutely destroyed in that one, and a really bad end to the season for them. Then let's look at the 2022-23 season. So quarterfinals, another home quarterfinal for them. Fourth versus fifth playoff. So again, should have been slight favourites, and home advantage should have been enough for them. But 5 points to 14 against Munster. A tight game, and again, Glasgow didn't deliver. Very different in terms of the scorelines, but the one kind of key, the one key kind of similarity between the two for me was that Glasgow didn't produce a performance that they would have said, okay, well, we went out, but at least we're proud of our performance. So third time now into a quarterfinal, that they've got to be able to do that. And again, my doubts are there for them. And because of that, then given, all of that, Glasgow's performance in quarterfinals over the last 2 years, and the fact that the Stormers have got to the final over the last 2 years, I've got to go for a Stormers win in that one. I do have a soft spot for Glasgow though, so if they did pull it off, I'd certainly be happy for them to do that. But I've got to give my actual opinion on this one, and I think that the Stormers are probably going to edge that one. Okay, so that is our look ahead at the quarterfinals. I'm not sure, with work schedule and stuff, how I'm going to approach the actual quarterfinals themselves. I think I can cover 3 of the 4 games in terms of doing a match review. That would be Munster Ospreys, Leinster Ulster, and Glasgow Stormers, because they're on at times where I'll be able to watch the games live. Bulls Benetton, won't be able to watch it live, but maybe on the Sunday, I've got the day off, so I might actually watch that game on repeat and maybe do a review on the Sunday of that one. It depends though, because like with these match reviews, it's very noticeable the amount of people interested in watching a review on the day that the game happens compared to the day after the game happens. So we'll see what happens with that one. It might be just one of those ones where I'm a bit tired on Sunday and I go, okay, I'm going to watch the game because I'm interested in rugby, but maybe making a video won't actually be worth the effort doing it at that point. But maybe for completion's sake, I might do it. But either way, we're probably going to cover at least 3 of the 4 quarterfinals with match reviews on the day that the games happen, and we will have a wrap up as well, probably on Monday for that, and then from there we'll do a preview of semi-finals, etc. on from there. So those are our look aheads to those quarterfinals. Let me know which predictions I got wrong. Again, who you think are going to be the 4 semi-finalists coming out of these, and who you're backing for the title as well.